Maggie. Now, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have done things that you can't remember doing. Like, not remembering the drive to work, early in the morning, because you were so tired. Like, not remembering where you put your cup of coffee, because you were distracted by something else. Right? We all have. But, have you ever lost time, and I don't mean while you were sleeping. Lost actual time, while you were fully awake. You know, 1 minute, it's 2 o'clock, and the next minute, it's 2:45. Well, I have. It was a cold January night, about 8 years ago. Now, I live in a small town. My parents live in the same small town. My God, I sound like that John Cougar Mellencamp song. Anyway, what I should have said was, my parents and I both live in a small town in Delaware. There, that's better. Anyway, I don't remember how this all came about. All I remember is that my wife and I were driving down the road, in the middle of a snowstorm. Snow and ice covering the road. Now, my parents live on an old back road, known as White Cross Road, out in Amish country. That's not the real name of the road, it's just what town folks call it, because it's lined with little white crosses, on both sides of the road, in people's yards, marking where dogs, cats, and sadly, a few Amish people, have been hit and killed by passing cars, going much faster than they should have been. Anyway, for some reason I can't remember, my wife and I were driving to my parents' house. I had just made the comment, to my wife, that it was hard to see the road, but if we stay between the crosses, we should be fine. That's when I attempted to veer right, following the road, and felt the van go into a slide. I tried correcting the slide, with no response. It was pure ice. Now, I don't care how big of a truck you have, how good your tires are, or if you have 4x4, it doesn't matter. We are all equal on ice. Anyway, right before I started the turn, I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It read 7:34 p.m. The van then slid across the road, toward a drainage ditch, and one of those white crosses. I remember it was a big wooden cross, about 4 feet high, painted white, with the word, Maggie, written on it. Hold on. We're going in, I yelled, and put my right arm out to hopefully keep my wife from slamming into the dashboard. I heard a dog bark, as a bright white light flashed, just as we were going to hit the cross, then into the ditch. That's when it happened. Everything went black. After what I thought was only a few seconds, my body jolted back hard, my eyes opened, and my wife was sitting next to me, in the van, both uninjured. Now here's the weird part. The van was back on the right side of the road, fully intact, sitting still, with my foot on the brake, before the turn. Did you hear what I said? The van was, before the turn, that it just slid through. How is that even possible? It happened, I know it did. Anyway, I looked at the clock on the dashboard once again. It read 8:13 p.m. My wife and I both lost 39 minutes of time, and have no idea what happened in those 39 minutes. Are you okay? I asked my wife, confused. Yeah, you, she asked, equally confused. I think so, I replied. I then took my foot off the brake, hit the gas, veered right again, and drove to my parents' house, unable to get what happened out of my mind. As I said before, I can't remember exactly why we went over there, but neither one of us mentioned to them what happened on the way over, and still haven't. The ride home was quiet. My wife and I didn't even speak to each other, and didn't for about an hour. Finally, as my wife was getting ready for bed, I asked her, hon, what happened out there? She just looked at me, with this petrified look on her face, and said, I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it, climbed into bed, and went to sleep. I respected her wishes, and never brought it up to her again. However, I was not frightened, I was intrigued. Although I may never find out what happened in those 39 minutes, I had this weird feeling it had something to do with that Maggie cross. So, the next day after work, the roads had been plowed and salted by then, and were pretty much clear. I decided to go back to the turn by my parents' house. I pulled into the driveway of the house that the big white cross stood in front of. I got out of the van, walked over to the cross, and stood there, staring at it. After a few minutes, I heard a soft female voice say, "Can I help you?" I turned to my right, to see this pretty blonde lady standing by the fence that surrounded the house that I was parked at. I introduced myself, and explained to her what had happened, half expecting her to look at me like I was crazy, and threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave. But she did not. She smiled. I was even more confused. "You heard Maggie, didn't you?" she asked. I just looked at her funny. "You heard a dog bark right before it happened, right?" she asked, smiling. "Yeah," I replied. "That was Maggie, or I believe it to be Maggie. You're not the first to come here and stare at this cross," she said, putting her hand on the top of it. "I'm not," I said. No, just last month, I had a young man come by and say that he had been texting on his phone while driving, took his eyes off the road, and drifted right off the road, heard a dog bark, looked up, and swerved the car back on the road. To avoid hitting the cross, she answered, and tapped the top again. In the last 5 years, since Maggie's been gone, many Amish kids have left flowers at this cross. I don't know why, but they only leave them at this one. Who is Maggie? I asked. She smiled again, as her eyes teared up. She said, Maggie was our dog. She was a beautiful black lab, loved kids, especially our son, James. He's 7 now, he was 2 when it happened. One summer's day in June, Maggie, my son, and myself were playing in the yard before we put this fence up. I had got a call on my cell phone. I answered the call and took my eyes off James. Mere seconds later, Maggie began barking, which caught my attention. I looked up to see Maggie running across the yard, and James mere feet away from the road. Maggie got in front of him, standing in the road, and nudged him back in the yard. Suddenly, this white car came around the corner fast, hit Maggie, and killed her instantly. She died right here. She died, saving my son. Now, I don't know about that time loss thing, or your vehicle being moved, that's something new, but I firmly believe it was Maggie that saved you that night. Wow, I said, thank you. You're welcome. My husband will be home soon. I gotta get dinner started, she replied, waved, turned around, and walked back into the house. I got in the van, and drove home, and never told any of this to my wife. A few months later, my wife informed me that we were having a baby, it was a girl, and said that I could pick her name. I decided to call her Maggie.